हेलो एवरीवन, अ वेरी वार्म वेलकम टू इनसाइटोनॉमिक्स। कैसे हैं आप सब लोग? आई होप यू ऑल आर डूइंग एब्सोल्युटली वंडरफुल। आई एम भावना सिंह। विल लर्न इकोनॉमिक्स टुगेदर। Stay tuned with me. Let's start the topic for today. So, you might have been asked the question to derive the shape of the IC using the given utility functions. So you've been given different types of utility functions and you have to derive the shape of the indifference curves. Okay, so it is very easy and we are going to derive it in this particular video. Okay, so first, as we know, indifference curve represents the graphic, it is a graphical representation for the different combinations, different bundles of good x and y, and that will give you the same satisfaction or the same level of utility. Okay, IC represents the same level of utility for the different combination of good x and good y. Okay, now the shape of IC is different for the different type of utility functions. Okay, so let me start. We have been given some utility functions and we have to derive the shape in each these four cases. Okay, so first start with this Cobb-Douglas type utility function. And shape of the IC also depend on the slope of the IC, that is the MRS, marginal rate of substitution. That represents the rate of sacrifice of the different units of good Y for an additional unit of good X, keeping the price constant. Okay. So first you have been given Cobb-Douglas type utility function. Okay, first let me. Okay, just fine. First, you have been given this utility function. This is a Cobb-Douglas type utility function, which simply means that you consume both the goods in some combination. This you use good Y and the ratio might be different. You might use more, you might consume more good Y and less of good X and vice versa. But there must be positive amount for both the good X and good Y. So in case if you are consuming zero of Y, like you are not consuming any unit of good Y, that means you are also not consuming any units of, you are not going to consume any units of good X. So you will get utility equals to zero. You will get zero utility out of that. So this Cobb-Douglas type means there is a little bit substitution or the complement nature between good X and good Y. You will consume both the goods in some combination, in some positive combination. Okay. So as we know, IC represents the graphical presentation of the good X and good Y. Okay, different combinations of good and good Y. So as we know, we take a good Y on vertical axis and good X like this. This is our axis. We'll take a good X on horizontal axis. We have this good Y on vertical axis. Okay, so we have to derive this in terms of Y. Okay, because the slope of IC is del Y by del X. Okay, I can also write it here. MRS is equals to del Y by del X. So you have to derive this particular equation in terms of Y because Y is the dependent variable while X, no, so yeah, X is the independent variable. Okay. So we have to convert this equation in terms of Y. So Y half, this is in multiply, this will come in denominator this side. So you will get U divided by X 1 by 2. When you square both the side just to get rid of this half, square both the sides. So you will get this half like this and this U square and X half square. Okay. So this will cancel out and you're left out with Y is equals to U square and X. As you know, your level of utility, level of satisfaction is constant along an indifference curve. So this will be a positive number. Suppose your utility is equals to 5. The square of 5 will be 25. Okay. Let's assume it, for example. So this is a positive number. It can't be zero. Okay. So in this case, like you are having an inverse relation between this y and x. This represents or this depicts that as you consume more of x, you have to sacrifice y to keep your level of satisfaction constant. Okay, so this represents the inverse relation between y and x. So inverse relation is depicted by a downward sloping curve. So in this case, you are going to get a downward sloping indifference curve, and this could not be linear because this is an inverse. This relation depicts an inverse relation, and you are having a utility constant. So suppose you are having, let's, you are consuming 0x. So when your x is 0, your y equals to like this. When you divide something by 0, you will get some infinite value. And similarly, you can also do the same for good y. Like if you say y is equals to 0, when you put y is equals to 0, like you can reverse this in a way, like you can do it like this. When you put y is equals to 0, you will get something like that. Again, infinite. So that means the ends of this curve is not touching the uh, horizontal axis, or it is also not touching the vertical axis. That means you will get a curve, a downward sloping curve like this. So now let me use this particular information to derive or to create indifference indifference curve. Okay, so I'm drawing it. In this case, you will get this type of indifference curve where the both the ends, the extreme ends, they are not touching the each of the axis. Okay, so इस केस में क्या है कि आप, बिकॉज दिस इज अ कॉपडोगलस टाइप यूटिलिटी फंक्शन जहाँ पे आप दोनों गुड एक्स एंड गुड वाई का एक पॉजिटिव कॉम्बिनेशन यूज करोगे, ऐसा नहीं होगा इफ यू आर हैविंग अ particular one good as zero, that you are not consuming any units of the other goods. So you good, that means you are also not going to consume any units to get zero utility. Because in this case, if you, like, this is our horizontal axis, we have good x and good y, and if you put like good x as zero, so that means you are your this axis is not touching the vertical axis. And similarly, if you put the y equals to 0, your this particular axis is not touching the horizontal axis because you are having some infinite value. Okay, so in this case we get this is also known as well behaved indifference curve because you are having the positive combination of both the goods. Okay, and this is downward sloping. And so this particular curve is known as rectangular hyperbola. Hyperbola. This is the name. This is the name for this particular curve. Okay, and in case of Cobb-Douglas type utility function, you will get this type of indifference curve, the convex to the origin. Okay, and in this case, your MRS that represents the slope of IC is diminishing. That means जैसे जैसे आप गुड एक्स का कंजम्पशन बढ़ाते जाओगे, जैसे आप इस तरीके से मूव करोगे, गुड एक्स का कंजम्पशन बढ़ाओगे, you have to decrease the consumption of good y because you have to keep the indifferent the utility, the level of utility constant. Okay, because along with the difference curve your level of utility remains constant. But as we know, like based on the law of diminishing marginal utility, जैसे जैसे आप पर्टिकुलर गुड का कंजम्पशन बढ़ाते हो, उसके जो मार्जिनल सेटिस्फेक्शन, मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी आपको मिलता है एडिशनल कंजम्पशन से, जो कम होते जाता है with the additional consumption. Okay, so जैसे जैसे marginal utility कम होती जाएगी and like you are sacrificing y and you are consuming more of कि गुड एक्स की जो मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी है वो कम होती जाएगी एंड गुड वाई की मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी बढ़ती जाएगी, क्योंकि गुड मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी ऑफ गुड एक्स इज डिक्रीजिंग, marginal utility of good y is increasing, you will sacrifice less and less of y with the further additional consumption of good x. Because like इससे पहले वाली वीडियो में हम लोग ने डिराइव भी किया है कि और एम आर एस इज इक्वल्स टू एम यू एक्स एंड एम यू वाई। सो जैसे जैसे आपका ये एम यू एक्स जो है कम होते जा रहा है एंड एम यू वाई बढ़ते जा रहा है ओवरऑल, तो आपका जो है एम आर एस ओवरऑल एम आर एस डिमिनिश करता है। एंड यू कैन ऑल्सो सी इन दिस, like I can also depict by using this graph, like at this but like suppose we have this bundle and this one and we have this one. Okay, here we have these three scenarios. In this particular point, like at point A, this is a point B and this is a point C. At point A you are consuming more of y and less of x. For the additional consumption of x you are like sacrificing more of y, like this much from point A to point B. But with the further additional consumption of good x, you are sacrificing comparatively lesser amount or lesser units of y. You can like the gap between AB is greater than the gap between BC. Okay, so this represents that your MRS is diminishing. That means जैसे जैसे आप additional consumption good x का बढ़ाओगे, the rate of sacrifice of units of good y will also diminish and fall with the additional consumption of good x. This the one line reason is law of diminishing marginal utility. Okay, Cobb-Douglas type utility function, you will get this type of convex to the origin downward sloping rectangular hyperbola type indifference curve. Second, we have a linear utility function. Ax by. Okay, here a and b are the constant, they are positive constant greater than 0. Okay, so as we know, like MRS represents the slope of IC, which is like del y by x, and now we have to this replace or this change this particular equation in terms of y. Okay, so I'll do it here. We'll be like by, this is positive, यहाँ पे दूसरी साइड जाएगा नेगेटिव हो जाएगा ax, and in terms of y you'll get u by b minus a by b x, and it's like if you derive the slope of it, like differentiate y with respect to x, this whole term becomes 0 and you will get minus a by b. Minus sign depicts the inverse relation or the downward sloping indifference curve. Okay, this is the slope MRS in, and but in this case if you put x is equals to 0, if you put x is equal to 0, this whole term becomes 0 and your y is equals to this u and b, and as we know u and b both are constant, u and number, it can be 1, it can be 2, 3, 4 and n, it is a some positive number. Okay, तो इसका मतलब ये है कि आपका y एक पॉजिटिव नंबर रहेगा, इसको इक्वल रहेगा, एंड सिमिलरली इफ यू पुट y इक्वल्स टू 0 like this, I'll solve it here. If you put first for x, like how using the particular equation, how we find that what are the type of what is the shape of the particular curve given the function. So here it is a negative sign, that means there is an inverse relation between y and x. Okay, first. Second, using the other information, it is a linear function. You change x by some amount, y will change by this a by b times. Okay, this is the slope. Okay, so using this information we'll get an indifference curve which will be downward sloping. And second, it will be a straight line because it depicts the linear relation, one-to-one relation. So if you put we can like prove it like this. If you put if you put x is equals to 0, your y is equal to some constant. When you had a particular value of these constant, you will get some like positive number for your y. And similarly, if you put y equals to 0, you will get some positive number for x. That means in this case, the IC curve is touching both the ends of the horizontal axis because it is linear, not sloping, it's straight line. So let me draw this using this information. I'm drawing my indifference curve. So in this case, it is your IC is touching the both the ends like this. Slope is constant. This good y, good x, and this slope is represented by like this a by b. This is the slope. MRS is equals to negative sign depicts this inverse relation, the downward sloping a by b, because it is constant everywhere. It is constant. That means it simply says that in order to consume one additional unit of x, you need to sacrifice two units of y, for example. So it will be similar. Like if you are consuming at this point, you will have to sacrifice 2 units of y for 1 unit of x. Similarly, if you are consuming here, you have to sacrifice 2 units of y, and it is like similar. Even if you are 10 units of x, you need to sacrifice 2 units of y each for additional unit of x. So in this case, your MRS is constant, will remain same at each point on the indifference curve. Okay. But earlier in case of Cobb-Douglas type, your MRS is not same MRS, your slope is changing at different point at different combination of good x and good y. Okay, but in this case, your MRS or the sacrifice of good Y for additional consumption of good X is same and remains constant at every point on the indifference curve. Okay, so in this case, we get this type of indifference curve and where the level of utility is constant. Okay, now we look for the Leontief utility function, where utility function is represented like this. And like I want to tell you one thing, you'll get this type of indifference curve in case of substitute goods, or you can say the perfect substitute. Okay, where both the goods are perfect substitutes or the alternative for each other, you will get this type of indifference curve. Okay, and now we'll see for the complements goods. Here, good X and good Y are complements of each other. That means both are used in a some proportion in some combination. Okay, like 1x 2y, 2y 1x, 2x 2y, like this. So there is some ratio. They are used together. You can't consume them separately. You have to consume both the goods in some fixed ratio. That's why it is also known as fixed proportion utility function or the Leontief utility function. So in any case of complement goods, you will get this type of mathematical depiction of the utility. This one. So now we'll find the indifference curve. So as we know, both the goods are used in a particular proportion, particular combination. So here your AX, A and B are the some constants. Okay, is equals to BY. In terms of Y, when we write it, so it will be like this: A by B and X. So they are both they are representing a one-to-one positive relation. Both are used in a fixed proportion. If your X is equals to 0, your Y will also be 0. Similarly, if your Y is equals to 0, your X is also 0. It simply says the complementary nature of both the goods, that both the goods are used in a fixed proportion. आप उनको सेपरेटली यूज नहीं कर सकते हो, लाइक आपके दोनों पैर के शूज एंड दोनों पैर के सॉक्स एंड लाइक दैट, तो आपको एक कॉम्बिनेशन में ही आप यूज करोगे उनको. एक इंडिविजुअली आप एक शूज पहन के नहीं जा सकते, इंडिविजुअल आप एक सॉक्स पहन के नहीं जा सकते, राइट, बिकॉज दे आर कॉम्प्लीमेंट ऑफ ईच अदर. सो इफ ओके, सो इन दिस केस If you get derive the slope is MRS is equals to del y by del x. You will get this 1 by b. This is the slope of MRS or the slope of IC. Okay. So in this case, because this is a complementary type of uh, utility function, you will get this type of utility functions. Sorry, indifference curves like this. Because both the goods are used in a fixed proportion like this. This is your IC. Here you have good Y, good X. Okay. So in this case, like if you put X is equal to 0, your Y is also 0. And if you put Y is equal to 0, your X will also be 0, because both the goods are used in some fixed proportion, fixed ratio. Okay. Because they are complements to each other. Now we'll look for the fourth type of utility function, that is quasi-linear utility function. Like why we called it quasi-linear, because we have two goods. One good is with a linear function and other good is in non-linear function. Okay. So that means marginal utility of one good is constant while the marginal utility of other goods is not constant. It is diminishing with the additional consumption of that particular good. Okay. So here we have this type of utility function, log x plus y. So in this case, your x is with the log while y is having no value. This means the marginal utility of y is constant while the marginal utility of x is not constant. Okay. That's why it is quasi-linear, because it is a combination of linear and non-linear functions. Okay. So when we derive it in terms of y, you will get u minus log x. So it is also depicting a linear relation, but it is in log form. It is a non-linear value, and your utility is constant. So if you put x is equals to 0, your y is equals to u, your utility, and you know your utility is some constant number. That means in this case, your indifference curve is touching the vertical axis. Okay, but if you put y is equals to 0, you will get log x is equals to u, but your log x is a non-linear function, so it won't be 0. Okay. So in this case, you will get this type of indifference curve like this. Sorry. You will get this type of indifference curve, which will be more flat, but they are also downward sloping. This is your IC. Okay, let me. Okay, but this is good. Y, good X. So here it's like if you put x is equals to 0, if this whole term will be 0, your y is equals to u. So at this point, your y is equals to u. Okay. So this is the indifference curve. This is for the quasi-linear utility function. Okay. And like you'll get one thing very clear, that for the different type of utility function, you'll have a different indifference curve. That also says you have a different MRS, that is different slope, or you can say the different rate of sacrifice of units of good Y for an additional units of good X. Okay. So the sacrifice of good Y for an additional consumption of good X will differ in different type of utility functions, or in case of different nature of the goods. So when the goods are having substitute of each other, you'll have different type of indifference curve, different type of or a different MRS, that is a different level of sacrifice. And like similarly, when you have a normal goods, you have a different MRS and it is diminishing. So in short, it's like that your indifference curve, the shape of indifference curve depends on your MRS, okay? And your MRS depends on the nature of goods and services that you consumed, okay? So and it is different for the different type of goods and different type of utility functions. So I hope ये आपको clear हुआ होगा. We are done with this topic.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you find our content insightful and productive, make sure to share, subscribe, and hit that like button. That will help us to grow and learn together. If you had any suggestions, queries, please do comment us and you can join us on our Telegram channel. Thank you. मिलते हैं next video में.